Okay, if you have your Bibles this afternoon, I'm going to have you open them up to the book of Job. Yes, the book of Job. So like I mentioned earlier, we went through about 5 weeks of mission strategy. What we are all about here for the last 5 weeks, we've gone through different themes of what we want to do here in the months that lie ahead. But I thought it would be good of us to spend about 5 weeks, the next 5 weeks, we're going to go into a book that has a lot of complexities to it, but it's going to be something that will speak to what we have all really experienced over this last year and a half. So, what would our Bibles be without the book of Job? Think about that. Sometimes I'm on a job site and I have a bunch of tools and I don't have the right tool to do the job. I think if the Bible was missing the book of Job, we would be without a major tool in doing the work that is before us. So sometimes I have to go down to Home Depot and get the right tool so I can come back, and once I got that tool, then I can do the job. If you're not reading or looking at the book of Job, you might be without the right device to really be handling the kind of stuff that we've been facing here lately, at least here the last 2020 was just a doozy of a year, right? And I think this book here, Job, helps us navigate the seasons of life that are typically pretty difficult. Now, I grew up in the Pentecostal and charismatic tradition. And growing up in that realm, you learn a lot about the victorious life, which is a very good thing. We're not defeated, right? As Christians, we have victory in Jesus. He has made us more than conquerors. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, and we're supposed to have these positive confessions, right? In my tradition, that was very much a part of who we are. But sometimes I think we don't think about the full picture of what that means. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Sometimes that means that Paul says, I can be abased and I can abound. I can go through suffering and I can have victory. I can do it all. I can do victory and I can do suffering. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And so sometimes I'm called to take up my cross, follow Jesus, and I can do that. That's what Paul's saying. It's not that I could just always have success and victory and live on top of the world. Sometimes I can live on the bottom of the world. I can do that too because Christ strengthens me. So, and that's what Job helps us to do. Helps us to do suffering. Sometimes we do victory. Sometimes in life, even as Christians, we do suffering. And we can do that. And Job helps us do that well. So I don't believe enough attention is paid to the idea of grief, sorrow. Sometimes we get squeamish, we get uncomfortable. If somebody is going through a really difficult time and they have a negative confession, sometimes we want to fix that and tell them, oh, don't be so down in the dumps. Listen to this. And we want to cheer them up. But sometimes I think books like Job allow us to stay in a place where we can just suffer. We can face sorrow. We can face loss. When you lose a loved one, you're not expected to get over it tomorrow. You can go through a season of grief, and that might be months, and sometimes that might be years. And if you're a parent and you've ever been bereaved of a child, you never really fully get over that. Is that okay? Is sorrow okay? Is grief okay? Is lament? You want to look at a psalm that is lament. Look up sometimes. Just scratch down 88. Psalm 88. Look that up sometime and just read it. It's one sad songs. But like Elton John said, sad songs say so much. They just hit you in the nice spot, right? You listen to a sad song and it just connects because I can identify with that. We can't always identify with the victory songs because sometimes I'm not there. Sometimes I'm down in the dumps. I'm going through something. I've lost something. I've lost a relationship. I'm in pain. Somebody hurt me. Is it okay to go through a season of grief? I think Job allows us to say, yes. How do we do that? And that's what this book is all about. So we're going to call this series a Grief Observed. It's after, I borrowed the name from C.S. Lewis's slim little volume, 75 pages long. It's called A Grief Observed. This was his journal that he kept at his nightstand when he lost his wife. He got married late in life, and Joy Davidson was the lady that he got married to, and then she got cancer and passed away. And he was like, why do you even give us blessings, God, when you're going to turn right around and take them away? Why? And he went through a season of grief where he just questioned God. And in the book, if you were to read it, it's phenomenal because he starts off mad. Well, he starts off sad, and then he kind of gets mad. Then he almost gets kind of blasphemous. Shakes his hand or his fist to God and says, why did you do this? And he says all these just really nasty things about God. And then he goes through these ups and downs where he goes into these moments of praise, and he goes back into anger, and then he comes back into love and intimacy, and it's just all over the place. And then he ends the book with this note of just high praise, kind of like the Psalms. Right? The Psalms kind of has this trajectory of this grief and sorrow, and then it just goes into this place of praise, high praise even, Psalm 149 and 50. So the Psalms allows us to have this we can modulate from a high note to a low note. We can do all the notes through life. And C.S. Lewis here is talking about how we can actually observe grief, not just neglect it. We don't ignore a grief ignored, a grief stuffed. No, a grief observed. Let's get it on the table. You got grief in your life? Do you got sorrow in your life? Do you face depression? Do you face anxiety? The best thing you can do is have a sense of self-awareness. You don't want to stuff it. You want to be able to talk about it. You want to get it on the table. You want to observe the grief. Don't be afraid of it. Ask it questions. Ask God questions. Get it into the presence of God and analyze it together. Bring other people into the room. Don't try to do it by yourself. Bring God into the picture, into the equation. Bring other people, trusted friends, into the picture so you can observe your grief. Don't stuff it. Don't ignore it. So here, we're going to be handling this book in 5 parts. So 5 weeks. If you'll throw up that next slide. This is the breakdown of the book here. It's 42 chapters long. We're not going to read the whole passage, the whole book, but we're going to handle this in 5 parts. If you look up here, the first part is a prologue, and the last part is an epilogue. Every book or most books have these, right? Prologue kind of gives you an introductory, kind of gives you some context, whatnot, what to expect. Epilogue is kind of an afterword. Okay, so this is kind of the narrative piece of the book. Whereas the middle, the dialogue and the monologue is chapters 3 through 41. The majority of the book is these dialogues between Job and his friends, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, okay? There's 3 cycles of these things. And then you got the monologues where these long, flowery speeches, Elihu and then Job, and then God has this long section, okay? So these long speeches. So there's dialogues and speeches, which is this dense Hebrew poetry, really, really thick, okay? But right in the middle, there's this one chapter called an interlude, probably the most important piece of the whole book, okay? So today, we're going to be looking at the first piece. It's the prologue of the work. So I'm going to read it in total, 2 chapters long, okay? Fascinating. It sets the story. If you don't get this, you don't get any of Job, okay? So listen closely. This is where it all begins. And I want you to ask the question as we go through this section, okay? Where is God in your suffering? Job chapter 1, verse 1. Let's read the whole thing together. Where is God in your suffering? There is a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. And that man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. There was born to him 7 sons and 3 daughters. He possessed 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 female donkeys, and very many servants. So that this man was the greatest of all the people of the East. Wow. His sons used to go and hold a feast in the house of each one on his day, and they would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. And when the days of the feast had run their course, Job would send and consecrate them, and he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, "It may be that my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." Thus Job did continually. So this is picture perfect. I mean, this guy is the best of the best, the creme de la creme. I mean, this guy is awesome, right? Verse 6. Now there was a day when the sons of God, chapter 38, verse 7 says these sons of God are angels, okay? Where these sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. And Satan also came among them. And the Lord said to Satan, "From where have you come?" And Satan answered the Lord and said, "From going to and fro from on the earth and walking up and down on it." And the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? That there is none like him on all the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil." Then Satan answered the Lord and said, "Does Job fear God for no reason? Have you not put a hedge around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face." He's a mercenary God. He doesn't love you for you. He loves you for all the gifts that you give him. You've given him so much stuff. You take those away, he'll curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, "Behold, all that he has is in your hand. Only against him do not stretch out your hand." So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. Now there was a day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in the oldest brother's house, and there came a messenger to Job and said, "The oxen were plowing and the donkeys were feeding beside them, and the Sabeans fell upon them and took them and struck them down, and the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you." While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, the fire of God fell from heaven and burned up all the sheep and the servants and consumed them, and I alone have escaped to tell you." While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, "The Chaldeans, they formed 3 groups and made a raid on the camels and took them and struck them down, and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you." And then again, verse 18, while he was yet speaking, there came another and said, "Your sons And daughters were eating and drinking wine in the oldest brother's house. And behold, a great wind came across the wilderness and struck the four corners of the house, and it fell upon the young people, and they are dead. And I alone have escaped to tell you. Then Job arose, tore his robe and shaved his head and fell on the ground and worshipped. And said, naked I have come from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And in all of this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. Job 2, or shall we say, round 2. Again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them and presented him before the Lord. And the Lord said to Satan, from where have you come? Satan answered the Lord. The Lord answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it. And the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in all the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil? He still holds fast his integrity, although you incited me against him to destroy him without reason. Then Satan answered the Lord and said, skin for skin. All that a man has, he will give for his life. But stretch out your hand and touch his bone and touch his flesh, and he will curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, he is in your hand. Only spare his life. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and struck Job with loathsome sores. From the sole of his foot to the crown of his head, he took a piece of broken pottery with which to scrape himself while he sat in the ashes. Then his wife said to him, do you still hold fast your integrity? You can imagine she just lost all of her kids, so she's angry. She's bitter. She says, curse God and die. But he said to her, you speak as one of the foolish women would speak. Shall we receive good from God, and shall we not receive evil? In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. Now, when Job's 3 friends heard of all the evil that had come upon him, they came from each his own place: Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, Zophar the Naamathite. And they made an appointment together to come to show him sympathy and comfort him. And when they saw him from a distance, they did not recognize him. This was bad. And they raised their voices and wept. And they tore their clothes and sprinkled dust on their heads towards heaven. And they sat with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights. And no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his suffering was very great. So he goes from this perfect picture to a pathetic picture in the space of a short period of time. Where is God in your suffering? And I think we can surmise by this passage that he is right there. Where is God in your suffering, in your trouble, in your trial? The trial of your life, he is right there. Now, this could be a comforting thought because God was fully aware of everything Job was going through. This did not escape his attention. He knew what Job was facing. He was fully aware of everything that Job was going through. But this notion could be troubling, because then why did he allow it? Why is he permitting it? And I'm almost like sitting over idly on the side, just observing the whole thing. Doesn't he care? Doesn't he love him? Can't he do something about it? And that's the great problem of they call it theodicy. It's like the problem of suffering. If God is able and God is good, then why does he allow it? So it could be troubling. It could be disturbing, the fact that he's right there, because he's really the one that kind of set the whole thing in motion. Have you considered my servant Job? That's disturbing, it would seem. But it is comforting to know that at least God's the one drawing the limits. You can do this, but no more. Here's some boundaries. And you should know, in your life today, there is boundaries around your pain. The world their enemy can only go so far, and God will draw the line that says that's enough. God's drawn a boundary, a limitation around your pain. But if it's comforting, or if it's not comforting, or if it's disturbing, our only hope is knowing that God is in the equation. You're never divorced. You're never cut off from God. God knows, God sees, God cares, God's there. God's always in the equation. Sometimes it's kind of hard when you're thrown in the midst of something to get your bearings and to even know that God is there. God is present. He's able. He knows what you're going through. This whole book is acted out on an earthly stage. And if you think about it, Job didn't know that something was behind the curtain. But there was. It was this larger heavenly context. And we should know in our pain that there is a larger spiritual dimension to it all. There is a heavenly context. Job didn't know there was something behind the curtain. We all do, peering into the story, but Job didn't. He was completely unaware. And when we're going through problems and trials and troubles, so are we. So are we. We have no clue what's behind the curtain. Is there a spiritual dimension to this thing? Is there a larger context for what I am going through? It can have a bewildering effect, sometimes head scratching. Why am I having to go through this? And when it rains, it pours. Look at chapter 1, verse 14. This is very interesting. Thinking about this year that we've gone through here, 2020, it was kind of like this. Look at this here. Chapter 1, verse 14. There came a messenger and said to Job, can you throw up that slide? Yeah. There came a messenger and says, hey, the Sabians fell upon us, and all the oxen and the servants have been taken or killed, oxen, donkeys, and servants, yes. Then, while he was yet speaking, there came another, saying, fire of God fell and consumed the sheep, consumed the servants. While he was yet speaking, this is one thing right on top of another. Camels and servants were struck. And while he was yet speaking, fourth time, there came another. Your sons and your daughters are dead. Boom, 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 boom. And hasn't that felt like this last year? One thing right on top of another. First, why don't you go to that next slide there? There came a messenger to Job and says, the coronavirus fell upon them. Right? And while he was yet speaking, there came another and said, racial tensions fell from heaven. coronavirus and these racial things just... And while he was yet speaking, there came another and said, wildfire struck them down. I mean, the whole West Coast was on fire. Well, remember that last August? I mean, this happened like wintertime and springtime and summertime. And what happened in the fall? What happened in the fall? Nobody knows what happened in the fall? Election season. A tumultuous election season struck the four corners of the house. How much can we take? 2020, man, was a doozy. Makes your head spin. Isn't it good to know that there is a heavenly context to all the trouble and the trial that we face in life? That we're not cut off and by ourselves somewhere, but God is present. God knows. He's involved. He's intimately involved. He's aware. He knows. And so, when we feel like we're all alone, let Job remind you that there is a spiritual dimension to it all. Paul says in Ephesians, we wrestle not with flesh and blood. Right? We think we get locked into this human struggle. We're just striving and flesh and human and just frustration and anger. But there is a larger thing going on. Let us never forget the context that Job paints for us through this book. To some, this might be comforting to know that God is with us in our troubles. To some, this might be troubling to know why He permitting it. To others, this might be disturbing because sometimes He sets the thing in motion. But to understand the book of Job, we need to make 3 radical shifts. And this will just kind of set the stage as we go through this book for the next 4 weeks. These are powerful things here. And if you sit down with the book of Job and wrestle these things through, man, this will help you appreciate the tool that is in our tool belt called Job. If you're missing this tool, you won't be able to do the work God puts before you in this thing called earth. So, firstly, the first key, I believe, in helping us really appreciate and understand what God is trying to do with this book here is this. The book of Job is not about Job. It's about God. It's easy to get transfixed on Job because, well, this innocent guy going through all this trouble and suffering. But if you look closely, the book's not so much concerned about Job's suffering as it is about God's involvement in our suffering. And what does that say about God? C.S. Lewis, in this book here, Grief Observed, he says, and this is profound, he says, I am not in much danger of ceasing to believe in God with what I'm going through. The real danger is coming to believe such dreadful things about Him. The conclusion I dread is not so there is no God after all, but so this is what God is really like. God allows this stuff. He permits it. He watches it. Sometimes He sets things in motion. What does this say about God? And so the way He runs the world, His policies are under investigation. Job is not on trial in this book. God's policies are on trial. God does this? God allows this? Why? And so we're like, what in the world? The book of Job is not about Job. He's just the test case. The subject matter is God. How do we view God at the end of the day after we go through things such as Job is going through? Number 2, The book of Job is not about justice. This is a woozy here. The book of Job is not about justice, but about wisdom. 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 We all love the words of Martin Luther King. He says, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. But is that always true? And what happens when it doesn't? Job should help us navigate life when it doesn't. So the book punches holes in this whole this law of sowing and reaping. You reap what you sow, right? Good things happen to good people. Bad things happen to bad people. And so when something bad happens to somebody good, we're like, wow. We look for a reason. Why? And we assume that they must have done something bad. But if they didn't, and we know Job never did, how come something happened like that to him, to her? It seems unjust. Is God just? Yes, he is, but sometimes it doesn't seem like that's the case. So things seem unjust and things seem unfair, but that's the very point of the book. And it should get our hackles up. Why does Job have to go through? Why does she have to go through this? And we're just incensed and angry because that's not just. That's not fair. So to think that justice is the way the world works is too simplistic. Bible commentator John Walton says, given a fallen world, perfect justice is not attainable. So rather than defending God's justice, the book defends God's wisdom. When something doesn't align up with our sense of justice, then now we have to come over here and rely upon God's wisdom. Why is he allowing this? Well, I'm going to trust that God knows what he's doing. There is no guarantee that God will run the world according to justice, but that he will run the world according to wisdom. Number 3, the book of Job is not about comfort, but it's about preparation. It's really hard to send a person to the book of Job, when they're going through something and really face some dire situations, and then for them to really get comfort from this book. They can identify with Job, but there's not a lot of answers in Job. There's a lot of questions. Do you know there's 330 questions in this book? In a book like Psalms that has 150 chapters, there's like 160 questions I think I read. But in a book like Job, there's 42 chapters, there's 330. Why? So there's not a lot of comfort here, not a lot of answers. But what it does provide here is training. The book of Job is training, keeps us flexible. You got to stay limber in this thing called life. Sometimes justice can keep us in a narrow framework, narrow mind frame. And it's like things aren't right. Things, it has to be, things need to align, and so therefore we can get kind of rigid or even brittle. And this is how people lose their faith sometimes, because they shake their fist at God and wonder why. And so justice keeps us in a narrow place, but wisdom keeps us in a broad place, keeps us flexible, so that when things don't go just right, we're still in a place of trust. This keeps me flexible, keeps me limber, to be able to get into tight spots and bend, but not break. So when disaster strikes and things go down the pike, I know this stuff. I know this. Job has prepared me for this. So 2020 has been a doozy. We're not quite out of the woods yet. But this hasn't been the first time. If you read history, there's been other moments of life that's been like, whoa, lots of questions. And likely this won't be the last. I think 2020 was kind of just a reminder that, hey, in a place like America, we got all the comforts of life. But those can be taken out from underneath us. And we got to be prepared. We need this book in our toolbox. We need to know how God operates. He conducts the world with his wisdom that far exceeds what I can even conceive of what being right or wrong or otherwise. Here's how I want to enter a time. We need each other. Job, when he was in his lowest point, man, he went from picture perfect to picture pathetic, man, and he was really in a bad situation. But he had faithful friends. Last week we talked about solidarity. How do we do something together? These guys, they came and they saw and they wept and they sat with him in his pain. Many of you guys today, collectively, we've been through a lot, but individually, you're probably facing challenges, disappointments, personal pain, things you wake up in the morning and this occupies your thinking until you got to get things straight and get things right. You're going through pain and suffering. You need to know that somebody is willing to sit with you. This is part of the beauty of gathering as God's people, that we're together. We're not on our own. We're not off in some corner. God is not remote. God is near. And the people of God, we have friends who would be able to sit with us. So I want to take a moment as the music team gets ready. I want you to know you're not alone. I want you to know that you're sitting in a room of friends who might not understand what you're going through to the degree that you do. But I want us to know that we're together and somebody's praying for me. So instead of trying to introduce all this stuff, we don't have masks and stuff. We're trying to still kind of, we'll get to a spot there. But I want you to pray for the person on your left, immediately to the person on your left. And I want you to pray for the person immediately to your right. We'll just do some music, okay? Take some time, okay? Job's friends came and sat with him. I want all of us to be friends. Sit with one another. And know the person to your left and know the person to your right is facing something. What are they facing? Pray for them. Sit with them. Sit with them in their pain. And allow the Holy Spirit to do a work in all of us. A work of solidarity. You're not alone. God's with you. God sees you. And God cares. And so does his people. Let's take a couple moments to do that. And then we'll sing this last song.